March the 5th of this year, 2022, Elementalism, after a 5-year development period, finally released Phase 1. Now, if you're not aware of Elementalism, or why you should be excited about it, well, let me put it this way. It is a GZ Doom map set that leverages many of the bells and whistles afforded to Doom mapping via the GZ Doom sourceport, not to mention the enviable skills of its all-star mapping team, and pretty much just puts absolutely everything on show. These levels are sweepingly epic in scope, but more than just being visually sumptuous, they're also quite inventive in terms of their construction, with many moments scattered throughout the levels here, causing me to just take a moment to consider the true magnitude of what I'm seeing. A great example of one of these moments would be towards the end of the first level of the Water chapter, where peeking out at the back of this cave here will grant you quite an impressive view, but this here is more than just a skybox. This is pretty much a straight up preview of every subsequent level you'll be playing through during the course of this chapter. Even better, once you're down in that valley playing through those levels, you can in fact look up and see the preceding level you came from. I absolutely love shit like this. Stuff that makes the world you're playing through feel like a cohesive and tangible place. Now, all that said, I did actually go into this with a little bit of trepidation because, you see, in the past, my experience with this kind of indulgent, ornate, large-scale mapping kinda left me cold. I had a term for it when maps like these went wrong, and that was to describe them as level wank. Level wank is what happens when the mapping gets a little out of hand, and it's just the mapper showing off but kinda leaving the rest of us behind. It happens when you get a map that opens up in a very elaborate and truly impressive way, but take one wrong turn, the thread is lost, and you're spending the next 15 minutes scratching your head wondering what you missed. It's frustrating, it's annoying, and mercifully, it's not a problem that Elementalism has. Had you fooled for a second, didn't I? Yeah, this is good level wank. In any case, I should probably just wheel this back a little to how you'll first experience Elementalism, because it actually all kicks off from this hub area, which does actually give you the choice between which of the 3 chapters you want to choose first. Now, if I had to offer a recommendation, I'd probably say start with Earth, because these do progress in order of intensity from left to right. Earth, Water, and then Fire. As for me, I started with... So I've already heaped a bit of praise on the Water chapter here, what with that impressive viewpoint towards the end of the first level, allowing you to survey levels to come, but truth is, the Water chapter as a whole is a pretty damn delightful playthrough. Opening level, a Watery grave, introduces you to the overall theme via aqueducts and caves, and much like the other levels here during the course of Elementalism, will offer you multiple choice when it comes to how you track down those relevant skull keys. This level also wins points for featuring a diorama switch, which I've seen utilized in various other map packs, but is generally a really great way of informing the player of what a switch has done without necessarily needing the switch to be right next to the thing, or within direct line of sight. This level is also where I first got acquainted with using the Wand of Elements, the weapon that you acquire during the hub map. Despite having to pistol start at the beginning of every map during the course of Elementalism, the Wand actually stays persistent and will follow you throughout, and intriguingly, depending on the chapter that you're playing, that will affect the kind of charge that the Wand receives. Charges are acquired through the collection of crystals, and in the case of the Realm of Water, it becomes charged with water magic. In practice, it's more of an ice wand than a water one, but hey, it's all just different forms of matter, and can indeed have the effect of freezing enemies solid, if not just obliterating them completely, because, believe it or not, this thing is actually pretty damn powerful, and best reserved for tougher situations. Another quirk of each chapter here in Elementalism is that they'll feature their own unique additional enemies. In the case of the Water chapter, you'll be pestered by the occasional swarm of arachnorbs, as well as harassed by deep ones, which feature not just a tanky pool of health, but also a relatively swift-firing energy projectile attack which can home in on your position. But after dealing with all that, it's onwards and downwards to the Sunken Temple. Probably worth mentioning at this point that each level actually features its own little snippet of lore to be read at the start, adding just a little smidge of texture and depth to the chapter that you're playing through. It's not strictly essential, but it's always nice to have. Temple itself is a pretty fun playthrough, albeit much more claustrophobic in terms of style and the kind of battles that you'll engage in, and also features just these neat little touches, such as elevators depositing you in a floating body of water which you can then float upwards through to the next room. It's just little bits scattered throughout that put a smile on my face. This level also features that wonderful vantage point out here in the courtyard where you can glimpse where you came from. That is when you're not busy dodging fireballs and shooting things in the face. And its final section here certainly sticks in the mind for the liberal usage of archviles and also having to deal with the cyber demon in an enclosed space. Yeah, I'd be lying if I said this one didn't produce a fair few beads of sweat upon my brow in the pursuit of getting through it. I'd probably say the follow-up map, Roots of the Weeping Mountain, is probably the most impressive of the bunch here in the water chapter, if only for the presence of this rotating spiral staircase. I don't know exactly how it was achieved. All I know is that it would have required a high degree of effort to pull off, and quite possibly the assistance of witchcraft. All things considered, this is actually quite the intimidating map to play through. It requires a full set of 3 skull keys in order to reach the exit. When it comes to what particular route you should choose in pursuit of said skull keys, it is pretty much entirely up to you. In terms of style, I'd say that this level certainly bears more than a passing resemblance to the likes of levels from Medieval, which, let's face it, is no bad thing. But in terms of encounters, oh yeah, this has certainly got that challenge dial cranked way up. The pursuit of each of those skull keys is certainly going to result in a fair degree of sweat being expended, but no more so than the acquisition of the red skull key, which certainly sticks in the mind more than others. Mainly for the fact that this chamber here gets comprehensively flooded with enemies. You've got your revenants, you've got troublesome archviles, and you've also got a pain in the ass cyber demon towards the back, and depending on how you choose to engage this cyber demon, you might be in for a bit of a headache. In my position, I was actually having to deal with not only moving out the way of said rockets, but also being very aware of the splash damage as they collide with pillars or walls behind me. But regardless of the challenge, still a really fun map to explore. Very intricate in terms of how it's all knitted together, and once again I find myself coming back to that just amazing central spiral staircase, which can be moved multiple times in order to access different portions of the map. Ascending to the giddy heights of the opposite side of the valley here, we find ourselves at the entrance to the Palace of Tears. Once again, if you so choose, you can of course peek over the ledge and see all of the progress you've made since the start of the chapter, which again, does not get old. It's such a wonderful idea, implemented tremendously well, and after you're done taking in the sights, it's a long walk across the bridge towards the entrance to the palace proper. Not gonna lie, once I got past my serious Sam PTSD induced by the mere sight of Egypt theming, I had to concede that this is a gosh darn pretty as heck map. In terms of layout, this one's a heck of a lot more simple in comparison to the last one. You've got mainly a choice between left and right in terms of what you tackle first. I chose the right-hand path, which lands you in this very complex-looking raised labyrinth type ordeal, nestled within what appears to be some kind of reservoir. Have to admit, this one did cause a little bit of chugging on my end, frame rate wise, but that's no surprise when you consider the sheer degree of line depths going on here, not to mention the section towards the back of the reservoir that seems to be there largely for ornamental purposes. But yeah, interesting section. Open air, but simultaneously claustrophobic when it comes to the encounters. Opposite side of the map actually managed to trick me with the presence of this really impressive looking water wheel model. It just attracted me to such a degree that I ended up falling into this ravine. Instead, the correct route will see you descending into this subterranean section here that is almost cathedral-like in terms of its scale, and rapidly fills up to the rafters with enemies once you hit the requisite button. This is a pretty hefty encounter to deal with. A lot of it will be spent evading, moving out the way, and largely hoping that enemies take care of themselves with infighting, essentially waiting for a good window of opportunity to unleash with your own weapons yourself. Somewhat deviously, there's also a number of soul sphere pickups throughout the course of this area, meaning that you will want to keep on the move from one section to the next in order to keep your health in tip-top condition. But this is no single one-time spawn of enemies either. It's progressive. It continues as the fight goes on, eventually unleashing the likes of cyber demons in your midst, and in general providing a pretty damn good, satisfying challenge. The Kako swarms can sod off though. As much as I like the Kako, there is such a thing as too much Kako. Acquiring the red and blue skull keys will grant you access to this area at the back of the central hub, as well as see you evading a swarm of Arachnorbs, which I gotta be honest, I was just tired of having to deal with, so I just decided to nope my way past them, plow on to the next section, and find myself dealing with a labyrinth full of archviles. Oh, happy day. Gotta admit, it's worth suffering through for the next little section, which features this really cool drop through this spiral stone staircase to the section below. Somewhat surprisingly, it dumps you in an oasis of sorts that I fully expected to become immediately overrun with enemies as soon as I acquired that skull key, but you know what? No, it didn't. Consider my expectations subverted. After that, it's back to that central area where you'll need to take down a few more deep ones before depositing that yellow skull key and finding yourself in what I like to describe as Bullshit Alley. Can you guess why? Final map for this chapter, the Fountainhead, seems to lean a little harder into the Serious Sam side of things, because it's not just the theming that gives me flashbacks here, but also the structure of the map itself and the setup of the combat encounters. You see, there's not actually a lot of exploration that needs doing here. Instead, you've got this relatively wide, open space, pockmarked with ruins and supplies in various corners, and once you press the button in the central ruin, that will begin the first of 5 successive waves, each giving you an escalation of enemy types. In all honesty, this map is chiefly about managing your resources, not wasting precious high-tier ammo against enemy types that don't specifically warrant it. That's not to say that the placement of resources throughout the course of this map is stingy, it's just also worth being aware that you're going to have to travel further out to the fringes in order to get those resupplies as you get deeper into the waves. I have to say though, in my personal opinion, 5 waves is maybe 1 wave too many here, especially when one of them, yet again, contains a big fat swarm of Kakos, but I won't deny it's quite cool seeing that shock of electricity between waves as it strikes the cubes hovering in the air and lowers them back into the ground. Successfully clearing all waves will see the final cube descend and the water wheel break, allowing you access to the opposite side and no doubt proving a massive headache for whoever's got to repair the damn thing. So first things first, I think I really need to point out how goddamn cool this corridor is that leads you deeper into the pyramid and then to the boss arena itself. It just looks like it took a lot of work. As for the boss itself, say hello to the Pale-Eyed King, a tremendously impressive looking creature, and something that I don't think I've ever seen pulled off in this particular way before within the realm of Doom mods and mapping. I think if I strain myself, maybe the nearest thing I can think of is the Icon of Sin from the Hell on Earth starter pack, but even then, that thing's stationary. This thing though, this thing is dynamic as all heck. It's practically steaming its way around the arena and only gets speedier as the fight goes on. In terms of attacks, you've got a number of things to deal with. When it's in full motion, it'll let off a stream of projectiles aimed in your general direction. Sometimes it'll burrow into the ground before popping up and sending a ring of projectiles outwards, which you can evade by hiding behind one of the many pillars in the arena. And finally, it can generate some elemental orbs, which honestly are actually quite easy to evade. Funnily enough, despite the visual whiz-bangery of everything going on here, the actual toughest part of this boss fight is firstly landing a hit on the damn thing while it's scooting around the place, and secondly, dealing with the mobs that pop up between certain phases. Personally, I was hoping this would be a bit more of a one-on-one deal. I was honestly at this point kind of tired of having to deal with large groups of enemies after the earlier part of this map, and it had the unfortunate effect of making this fight feel a little bit more drawn out than it needed to be. But all in all, still extremely impressive stuff for a boss fight. So at this point, I could drag things out and give you another run-through blow-by-blow of the remaining chapters here in Elementalism, but in all honesty, it's going to be a lot more of the same in terms of how I feel. Boy, these sure are some pretty levels. Man, the flow of them is actually pretty damn good, and jeez, am I surprised that my computer didn't catch fire, what with how expansive, elaborate, and just plain over the top some of these levels can get. Trust me though, there's some seriously inventive stuff sprinkled throughout the course of this. The giant clockwork cube that can shift around internally as you progress certainly springs to mind. And if you thought the boss at the end of the water chapter was impressive looking, wait till you get an eyeful of what awaits you at the end of Earth and Fire. You know, I'm almost a little intimidated that this is only phase 1 of Elementalism. There's going to be a whole other batch of chapters to be released later on down the line. If anything though, it's just wonderful to see so many talented people at the top of their game when it comes to mapping, when it comes to music, when it comes to presentation. Everything here is absolutely top shelf stuff. And on the music front, everything you've been listening to during the course of this video is actually from the official Elementalism OST. A variety of highly talented artists have contributed to this, and if you fancy giving some of these tracks a standalone listen, which I'd highly recommend, it is available in an extremely generous choose-your-own-price format over on Bandcamp, the link for which, alongside the download link for this here mod, you'll find in the description below. Thank you so much for watching this video, especially if you've stuck around up until now. It's been a bit of a long one, but if you're a little disappointed I didn't do a deeper dive through the remaining chapters here, feel free to pop on over to my Icarus live streams channel, where you'll find full, uncut, archived playthroughs of every Elementalism chapter released so far. Hopefully you've enjoyed your stay. Feel free to convey your appreciation, if so, through the medium of that like button, smashing or otherwise. If you haven't already, feel free to gently caress the subscribe button, and if you're feeling frisky, why not give my bell a bit of a tinkle. But until next time, this has been Mr. Icarus. Thank you very much for— oh, Patreon! Yeah, give me money. Icarus out.